Thank you. Wow. I can't actually tell if you can hear me. Can you hear me at the back? Good. All right. I'm here to talk to you about something which is extremely important. So it's very important that you can hear me. I'm going to talk to you about the future. I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow because that's why you're here, right? You're here to find a future for your children. Of course, if I knew exactly what the future was going to look like, I'd be rich, right? But I'm not. But what I can do is give you an insight which I think you'll find important. But whenever we're going to talk about the future, we normally have to go back a bit to explain it. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to take you back to 1988, when I was just 14 years old, and I was sitting in my math class with my friend David Scabaris. I remember this like it was yesterday. He was sat beside me, and we were messing around. And my teacher, he was an Irishman. I was in England. I grew up in England, and I studied there all my life, lived there all my life. Mr. Hackett, his name was, and he was teaching us long division. And I couldn't understand it. So I was messing around and talking with David, and Mr. Hackett came over, and he was really upset. He was really angry. And he said to me, "Sam, where's your work? Have you finished?" And I said, "No, I haven't even started yet." And he looked at David and he said, "David, what about you?" And David showed him his calculator and said, "I've done it, I finished." And Mr. Hackett said, "Well, that's wrong." And David said, "What, the calculator's wrong?" Mr. Hackett said, "No, not the calculator's right. You are wrong. You're supposed to work it out in your head. You're supposed to write it down." And David said, "Why?" And Mr. Hackett said, "Well, don't be silly. Do you think when you get older, everywhere you go, you're going to walk around with a calculator?" Well, yes. I don't know about you, right? But everywhere I go, I take a calculator. Is there anyone in this room, bar the very tiniest children, that doesn't have a calculator on them? Right? Now, was Mr. Hackett wrong? No. We do need to know the math. We do need to know long division. He was right about that. But what he was wrong about is what the future would look like and what we would need to carry up here. Now, I don't blame Mr. Hackett. It's not his fault. Mr. Hackett grew up in a time where things moved very slowly, right? He was around 60 years old when we had that conversation. So, Mr. Hackett must have been born around 1928. Here's what a telephone looked like when Mr. Hackett was born in 1928. As you can see, it has a dial, it has a cable, and it has a handle. 20 years later, 20 years, he's gone from a child to a grown man who can get married, and phones have become this. 1948, you can still see there's a handle, a dial, and a cable, and it does exactly the same thing in 20 years. Let's move on. 40 years later, ooh, it's red, but it's still the same, right? You've still got a dial, you've still got a handle, you've still got a cable, and voila, it makes phone calls. Fantastic. Okay, so Mr. Hackett now is 60. This is his entire life that's gone by. It's now 1988, and this is the technology that has moved on. It's the same. Okay, we've got buttons where there was a dial, but there's still a handle and a cable, and it still only makes phone calls. So in Mr. Hackett's life, things moved slowly. But just 20 years after this time, we got this. See what's happening here? Just 20 years after that time, we got this. A complete change. There's no cable now. There's no dial. Now we have applications that can do all sorts of things. Now we have to learn something from this. The first lesson is that things are going to move a lot quicker from now on. All right? Mr. Hackett's mistake was thinking that my future was going to look like his. And if we make that mistake, it's going to be even worse. Because the speed of change that is happening means that the future for our children is going to be vastly different from the one that we have now. But there's another very important thing about what happened when the technology changed. It's not just the look of it, it's what it does. And what it does change so much that it changed us. Let me give you an example. That phone I showed you at the beginning, the one where you had to dial, do you remember that? My mum had that phone at home. Now, my mum was a very smart lady. She knew about 20 phone numbers in her mind, in her head. You can ask her the phone number of the doctor, she knew it. The phone number of her neighbors, she knew it. Her sisters, she knew it. My phone looks a little bit like this. It can hold over 3,000 contacts. Do you know how many numbers I remember? One, my wife's number. And that's only because if I did not remember it, she would kill me. Right? Seriously, how many numbers do you know? You don't. I know people that don't even know their own number. You talk to them and you say, oh, great, okay, let's meet up. Give me your number. They don't know their own numbers. That's where we've got to. So we have changed because of the technology. What we need to know has changed because of the technology. Now, bear with me. Because if what we need to know has changed, shouldn't what we are taught change too? Don't be Mr. Hackett. Don't assume your children's future is going to look like yours, because you won't be able to plan for it if you do. So what does the future look like? This is great. You understand where I'm coming from. But now we have to look into the future. All right. Look, at first glance, it looks quite gloomy. I don't want you to worry too much, all right? Low skill level jobs are going to be automated. In other words, computers are going to do roughly 70% of the low skilled jobs. All right, we talk about low skill, we're talking about like factory work, things which are, you do with your hands. Middle skill level jobs, these are desk jobs, 46% of them are going to now be done by computers. All right, whether you call it computers, robotics, machines, it's the same thing. Now, here's where you got interested, right? Because of course, you're thinking, well, my son and daughter are not going to be in the first two categories. My son is going to be a doctor, right? Of course. Everybody here is going to have a doctor for their children, right? So they're going to fit here in the 8% category. Well, okay, let's have a look. Here's a glimpse into the future. That's a pharmacy. Can you see any people? No. It's not a normal pharmacy in the street, to be fair. It's the pharmacy at the University of California in San Francisco, all right? The reason you can't see any people is because there are no people working there. This machine, this computer, this robot dispenses the medicine for you. You come to the front and you give it the prescription and it works out everything you need. This machine has not made a mistake in 350,000 orders. It can serve 2 million customers without taking a tea break, and it will never get pregnant and need time off. Now you tell me, how are you going to compete? Not you, how are your children going to compete with this in the future? Here's another one. The Coastal Federal Credit Union Bank in America. That's actually a picture of Citibank, but they've already slashed 40% of their banking staff, because anything you want to do in the bank can be done by a machine. Here's another one. The Army. According to Army General Robert Cohn, from MarketWatch 2016, a quarter of the American Army will be robots by 2030. A quarter. So if the Army is the profession you're thinking that your children are going to be in, you may need to think again. Here's the doctor, all right? Johnson & Johnson, we know them. They're the people that make the talcum powder that we use in the nappies, right? But they actually do a lot more. This is the Sedasis system, designed by them, already FDA approved, and it can already automate the delivery of low-level anesthesia. I'll let that sink in for a second. That isn't to say that if you are a consultant anesthetist, you're not going to have a job. Of course you will. This will be overseen by a consultant. But he can oversee 5 of these machines at once, which means where we did have 5 consultant anaesthetists, we only need one. See the problem? Okay, but it's not all doom and gloom, because there are going to be completely different jobs in the future. But we have to be prepared that our children will have jobs that we've never heard of. 60% of the jobs in the future we've never heard of, all right? Things like a privacy consultant, things like a post-mortem digital life manager, things like avatar designers, things like data hostage negotiator, right? So one day, you're going to be sitting at home with the family, waiting for Yusuf or Marwa to come home and tell you whether she passed the interview or not. And she's going to walk through the door, and you're going to shout, "Mabruk!" Did you get it? She's going to say, "Yes, excellent. What are you?" She's going to say, "I'm a data hostage negotiator." Eda. Right? What is that? The important thing is, these are going to be very highly skilled, valuable positions in the future. We may not know what they are now, but they will. One quick example is a privacy consultant. What is that? Nearly everybody here has some kind of Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram account. But your children will have even more than this. They will spend an awful amount of time online. And all of these accounts, they leave what we call footprints. You're leaving parts of your life around, whether it be a bank number, whether it be a passcode, whether it be your address, pictures of where you've been. Now, for me and you, that's okay, because we're just normal people. We've got nothing to hide. But for very wealthy people, business owners, celebrities, royal families, they need somebody to tell them how to make sure that this data is kept safe and that it doesn't just get out. And this job will be an extremely important one. But today, we don't even have to think about it. So the future will look very different. So how do we prepare our children for this future? This is where we need to go on. Well, like I said, this is a phone in 1928. This was a classroom in 1928. As you can see, the children are sat in rows, single file, no one next to anyone else in case you cheat, everyone looking forward. And if I can be quite frank, they look miserable. Here's a telephone in 2016, completely different. The technology has completely changed. But look at the classroom. Apart from the fact that it's in color, they're still sat, single file, in rows, facing the front, and quite frankly, they still look miserable. So the first thing we need to do is change the classroom. We've got to start from scratch. These kids are learning math. They're learning angles and geometry. But so are these kids. They're learning angles in geometry as well. These kids are told, don't cheat. Don't look at the person beside you. Do it on your own. The answer is in the back. Don't look at it until we tell you. These kids are told, now remember that geometry and that math we were talking about? Apply it. Build a bridge. Show me how it works. Work together in groups, discuss. And that's where we need to be going, because they are applying this knowledge and therefore will remember it. Some of these kids here are going to be so bored and so disattached from the education that they'll fall out. What skills do children need in the future? Oh no. Oh no, how did that get in there? Sorry about that. That's my son. His name is Ibrahim. We call him Bibu, right? I forgot about this slide. While I was making this presentation, he came and he caught me making it, and he saw so many children, and he said he wanted to be in it. So I put him in, right? I'm glad he's there now, because he's 4 years old. And by the time he's ready to go to university, it's going to be 2040, all right? Now, at that time in the future, kids are going to be inundated with information. So one of the first things they're going to need is the skill to be able to decide what is important and what isn't. If you ask a child to do their homework on their own at the moment and they open up the internet browser, they're stuck. My 8-year-old child, Amana, I have 3 other daughters, came to me and told me, I need to study Cleopatra. Okay, open up the internet browser. The amount of information that faced her scared her. She didn't even know where to start. And that's now. Can you imagine what it's going to be like in 25 years? So the first thing they need to know, how to decipher information, how to take what's important and leave what isn't. They also need creative ideas that solve problems. All right? I want you to remember this if you don't remember anything else. That creative ideas which solve problems is the number one thing you can give to your child to plan for a successful and decent future for them. And here's one of the reasons why. Don't make them scared to make mistakes. This is an essay written by an elementary child in the IB curriculum, PYP. Now, as you can see, there are certain mistakes here. There are spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes, but her teacher wrote great ideas and put a stamp on it. Why? Surely she needs to spell things properly. Surely she needs to get good punctuation and grammar. But what we want to do is help children to be motivated so that they want to learn by themselves. And you can't do that if somebody keeps stopping you. Let me give you an example. My Arabic is terrible, right? I wish I could speak better Arabic, but I can't. But when I do try to speak Arabic to my colleagues, they don't keep stopping me at every word and telling me which word I got wrong. They smile and they allow me to finish because they know I need to practice. And it motivates me. The more I practice, the more I want to speak. If they stop me at every word, I'll feel embarrassed and then I won't want to continue. And it's the same with the child. Why don't we give them a chance to see what they did right? Then we can ask them to reflect, look back. How can we improve it? And maybe on their own, go and check and see how to improve the spelling and the punctuation. This will keep them motivated and make them feel successful and want to continue. Skills you need, like inquiry and collaboration. You'll hear this a lot when we're talking about IB. Inquiry means to ask questions. It's very simple. That's all it means. But it's a very important skill. The best problem solvers inquire. When you go to the doctor, doctors are very smart people. When you go to the doctor, you need a solution from him because you have a problem. What does the doctor do? He inquires. He asks you questions. Where does it hurt? How long has it been hurting? What have you been eating? How are your sleep patterns? He's asking questions, that's all. But this is how he's going to find your solution. Our children have forgotten how to ask questions. If they are going to survive in the future, they are going to need to learn how to inquire. And collaboration. We need to teach them to work with other kids because the future is connected, not singular. They need to take risks and reflect. Don't make them ashamed to make a mistake. A mistake is just how you learn. But reflection is important. Let's teach our kids how to think back. What did you do? Why was the mistake made? How can we fix it? What could you have done differently? And we've got to teach them how to communicate ideas. Because in the future, it is not going to be what you can keep up here, which is the sole importance. Because the telephone has that on it, or the desktop computer, or the tablet, or the iPod. All the information is there. But what people are going to pay you for is your ability to communicate ideas, to come up with solutions to problems. We've got to teach our kids how to think, and not what to think. If we can teach them how to think, how to learn, how to reflect, they'll be motivated to do these things for themselves, and they will build the skill set that they will need for a future society. Here are two children in my school, Manaret, Heliopolis International. They're PYP 6, which means they're about 7 years old. And you see this poster behind them? I was so proud when I saw it. Our PYP coordinator, Miss Beata, she came into my office. She said, I want to show you something. I'm the principal of the school. I'm not in classes every day. So I followed her. I went to the classroom. She said, have a look at that. And I was shocked. What had happened is these children had got together and they had put together this poster. This is the work of many children in the class. But Sidra and Hala were the last to add their part. Now, they had gone to different parts of the school to ask people what jobs they did. Right? They had opened books and looked at how factories supply things. They had looked at consumers and how pasta is made and needs and wants and organization and how corn is made. And they're writing down all of these things here. So many different ways of inquiry, using their hands for things, using their minds, thinking. And what they'd basically put together, the central idea, which the teacher hasn't bothered to write here yet because she doesn't want to scare them off, but they're learning economics at age 7. They're understanding the difference between supply and demand and how these ideas come together at age 7. We're not just pumping spelling and vocab and math into them. We're telling them use the spelling and the vocab and math to solve problems. And let's face it, we're going to need young people in Egypt that can deal with economic problems, right? We need people who can solve our economy, who can help us to make Egypt as it should be, Dunya, right? They didn't know I was taking the picture beforehand. When they saw me, they turned around, so I took another one, right? Here they are, fabulous. This man's quote, wear your failure as a badge of honor. I wanted to show it to you because I wanted you to understand why I thought this was so important. I didn't check the spelling of those 2 girls in the poster because that wasn't important, the idea was. This man studied in India. He was born in India and he studied in India and he went to the States late. He believes that every failure that we make is important because we learn from it. And that failure is what allows us to do things better in the future and become a success. You ask any entrepreneur, any successful businessman, what the journey has been like, and they will tell you all the things that went wrong and how they learned from that journey. This is Sundar Pichai. He is the CEO of Google, and he earns $50 million a year. You go on Google and type his name in and ask them whether he was the smartest man at math in his class, and they'll tell you no. Ask them whether he was the one who practiced the most, they'll tell you no. But what he did have was a set of skills. He can communicate well. He's a pioneer when it comes to new ideas. He's creative. He's caring. And he knows how to nurture a team. And that's the reason he's where he is. The last thing I want to say is that tomorrow is global. And if we want our children to succeed, we are going to have to make sure that our children understand how the rest of the world works. Egypt may be one of the greatest countries in the world, but Egypt is going to have to work with all the other countries if we're going to succeed in the future. And with that, I'd like to leave you with this. Can we turn up the sound, please? So it's time for us to stop asking when we go to see schools, is it the American system? Is it the British system? We need an international system because tomorrow is definitely coming. And so you've got to ask yourself the question, are you ready? Are you ready? Thank you very much.